Hi, I'm Felicity. My 11-year-old son, Max, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 7, and managing his condition has become second nature to our family. Well, most of our family. Mom, where's Grandpa Gerald taking my pump? Max asked, his voice thin with confusion as we sat on the deck of my in-laws' lake house. I looked up from my book to see my father-in-law walking toward the dock, Max's insulin pump in hand. Gerald, what are you doing with that? I called out, rising quickly from my chair. My husband Daniel was inside helping his mother prepare lunch, oblivious to what was happening. Gerald turned, his face set in that self-satisfied expression I'd grown to dread. Teaching the boy to stop using this nonsense as a crutch? My generation didn't have these fancy gadgets, and we turned out fine. That's Max's insulin pump. He needs it, I said, trying to keep my voice calm as I approached. Max followed closely behind me, anxiety clear on his small face. Gerald scoffed. Daniel was never sick as a child. This is all in his head. Or worse, something you've convinced him he needs. Gerald, this isn't a game. Give it back right now, I demanded, extending my hand. You've babied him enough, Gerald said. Then, with deliberate slowness that still haunts me, he tossed the $8,000 medical device into the lake. No, Max cried out, rushing to the edge of the dock. Grandpa, I need that! It's not fake! Max's voice cracked as he stared at the ripples where his pump had disappeared. Swimming after it might do you some good, Gerald said with a dismissive wave. Bit of exercise instead of all this medical drama. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. Daniel, get out here now! What's wrong? Daniel appeared on the deck, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. Your father just threw Max's insulin pump into the lake. He said Max's condition is made up. Daniel's face drained of color. Dad, tell me that's not true. Gerald crossed his arms. The boy's fine. You all coddle him too much. He has type 1 diabetes, Daniel shouted, his voice echoing across the water. It's an autoimmune disease. His pancreas doesn't produce insulin. Back in my day, Gerald began. Back in your day, kids with type 1 died, Dad, Daniel interrupted, putting his arm around Max, who was now crying quietly. We need to go, I said, gathering our things. Max needs his backup pump from home. This isn't safe. As we rushed to leave, Daniel's mother, Evelyn, appeared. What's happening? Why is everyone shouting? Ask your husband, I snapped. He just threw Max's insulin pump into the lake and called his medical condition fake. Evelyn gasped. Gerald, you didn't. They're overreacting, Gerald insisted. The boy's fine. He won't be fine in a few hours when his blood sugar spikes to dangerous levels, I said, helping Max to the car. As we drove away, Max looked at me with tears still wet on his cheeks. Why doesn't Grandpa believe I'm really sick? I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Some people refuse to understand what they can't see, sweetie. He called me a liar, Max said quietly. Daniel reached back to squeeze his son's knee. You're not a liar, Max, and what Grandpa did was dangerous and wrong. So what are we going to do about it? Max asked. I caught Daniel's eye, seeing my own rage reflected there. Something that ensures he never does anything like this again, I promised. He did what? Sarah, my sister and a registered nurse, nearly dropped her coffee cup when I told her what had happened the next day. Threw it right into the lake, I confirmed, watching Max play video games in the living room, his replacement pump securely attached. Called it a crutch, said Max's condition was made up. That's not just ignorant, Felicity. It's criminal, Sarah said, her medical training evident in her assessment. That's endangerment of a child with a life-threatening condition. I know, I nodded, lowering my voice. Daniel's devastated. He's barely spoken since it happened. What does Evelyn say? Sarah asked. She called this morning, apologizing profusely, said Gerald refuses to admit he did anything wrong. Of course he doesn't. Sarah rolled her eyes. Has he always been this controlling? Always, Daniel said, entering the kitchen. But this crosses every line. Have you talked to him since yesterday? I asked. Daniel nodded grimly. He called me weak for buying into medical nonsense. Said his father would have toughened me up instead of letting me baby Max. That's ridiculous, Sarah said. Type 1 diabetes isn't something you outgrow or overcome through toughness. It's a permanent autoimmune condition. I think we should talk to Dr. Patel, I suggested. Document what happened medically. And legally, Daniel added with unusual firmness. This wasn't just mean, it was dangerous. You'd pursue legal action against your own father? Sarah asked, surprised. After what he did to my son, Daniel's voice caught. Absolutely. Later that afternoon, we met with Dr. Patel in his office. So Max went without his pump for about 3 hours? Dr. Patel confirmed, making notes. Yes, I nodded. His blood sugar was 278 by the time we got home to the backup. And your father-in-law deliberately destroyed medical equipment? Dr. Patel looked up from his tablet. Threw it into a lake, claiming Max didn't really need it, Daniel said, his jaw tight. Dr. Patel shook his head. I can document this as medical endangerment. The interruption of insulin delivery in type 1 diabetes can lead to diabetic ketoacidosis, which can be fatal if left untreated. What would you recommend we do? I asked. First, I'll document everything in Max's medical record, Dr. Patel said. Second, I'd suggest speaking with a family law attorney. This isn't just about the destroyed property, it's about Max's safety. Gerald thinks we can just brush this under the rug, I said. He called this morning asking when we're bringing Max for their usual weekend visit. As Max's doctor, I would advise against unsupervised contact with someone who doesn't recognize the seriousness of his condition, Dr. Patel said firmly. As we left the doctor's office, I received a text from Evelyn. Gerald says this is all being blown out of proportion. He wants to talk to you both. What do you want to do? Daniel asked, reading the message over my shoulder. I think it's time we had a very direct conversation with your father, I replied. With witnesses present? I don't understand why you've brought a lawyer to a family discussion, Gerald huffed, glaring at Maria Gonzalez, the family attorney we'd consulted. We sat in Evelyn and Gerald's living room 2 days later. Daniel's sister Kate had also joined us, along with Sarah. We're here because you endangered our son's life, I said evenly. And you need to understand the seriousness of your actions. Endangered? Gerald scoffed. The boy was fine. This is ridiculous. Mr. Carson, Maria interjected, destroying a minor's prescribed medical device is considered child endangerment under state law. I didn't destroy anything, Gerald protested. I was making a point. By throwing his insulin pump into a lake? Daniel asked incredulously. You never needed any special devices growing up, Gerald countered. Dad, Max has a completely different medical situation than I did. Daniel's voice rose. You can't just decide his diabetes isn't real because you don't understand it. All these kids nowadays have some condition or another, Gerald waved dismissively. When I was growing up, medical science has advanced since then, Dad, Kate interrupted. Type 1 diabetes is well documented and life-threatening without proper management. The pump you destroyed costs $8,000, I added. But more importantly, without it, Max could go into diabetic ketoacidosis within hours, which can lead to coma or death, Sarah emphasized. Gerald's expression finally showed a flicker of uncertainty. Well, I didn't know that. Because you never bothered to learn about your grandson's condition, Daniel said. Instead, you decided you knew better than his doctors. I was just trying to toughen the boy up, Gerald insisted, though with less conviction. By putting him in medical danger? I asked sharply. Look, I'm sorry if I scared the boy, Gerald said, not sounding particularly sorry. Can't we just move past this? I'll even pay for the... whatever it was. It's called an insulin pump, I said through gritted teeth. And no, we can't just move past this. What do you want from me? Gerald demanded, spreading his hands. I said I'm sorry. Are you? Daniel challenged. Because you still seem to think Max's condition isn't serious. Fine. The boy has diabetes. I get it. I made a mistake, Gerald conceded, clearly hoping to end the conversation. A mistake that could have had fatal consequences, Maria pointed out. Oh, come on! Gerald stood up abruptly. This is getting blown completely out of proportion. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured in my own home. Sit down, Gerald, Evelyn said with surprising firmness. You need to hear this. What we want, I said, is for you to understand that your actions have consequences, not just for Max's health, but legally. Legally? Gerald's face flushed red. Are you threatening me? We're filing for a protective order, Daniel said quietly, and pressing charges for child endangerment and destruction of medical equipment. You can't be serious, Gerald sputtered. Over a misunderstanding? I'm your father. And Max is my son, Daniel replied. A son you were willing to put at risk because of your pride and ignorance. Gerald pointed a shaking finger at me. This is your doing. You've turned my own son against me. Don't blame Felicity, Kate interjected. This is entirely your doing. Get out, Gerald shouted, his face purple with rage. All of you, and don't expect to be welcome back. As we stood to leave, Gerald grabbed my arm. This isn't over. You'll regret turning my family against me. Daniel immediately stepped between us. Let go of my wife, now. Or what? Gerald sneered. Or I'll add assault to the charges, Maria stated calmly, recording the interaction on her phone. Gerald released my arm, but his eyes burned with anger. You'll be sorry for this, all of you. All rise, the bailiff called out as the judge entered the courtroom 3 months later. I squeezed Daniel's hand as we stood. This was the final hearing regarding the protective order and the child endangerment charges against Gerald. How are you holding up? Daniel whispered as we sat back down. Nervous, but ready for this to be over, I replied. Across the courtroom, Gerald sat with his attorney, looking smaller somehow in his ill-fitting suit. Evelyn wasn't beside him. She'd moved out 2 months ago after Gerald had continued to insist he'd done nothing wrong. Judge Williams reviewed the documents before her. I've considered all testimony and evidence in this case. Mr. Carson, do you understand the charges against you? Yes, Your Honor, Gerald replied stiffly. And do you understand that your actions put your grandson at serious medical risk? My attorney has explained the medical aspects, Gerald said reluctantly. I should hope so, Judge Williams said, because the evidence is quite clear. You deliberately destroyed vital medical equipment while making statements dismissing your grandson's documented medical condition. The judge continued. Based on the testimony of the minor's physician, this action could have resulted in diabetic ketoacidosis, a potentially fatal complication. Your Honor, Gerald's attorney interjected, my client has expressed remorse and is willing to pay restitution for the medical device. Noted, the judge replied. However, this case extends beyond property damage. Judge Williams looked directly at Gerald. Mr. Carson, I'm granting the protective order requested by your son and daughter-in-law. You are to remain at least 500 feet from your grandson, except during court-approved supervised visitation. Gerald's face fell. Additionally, the judge continued, on the charge of reckless endangerment of a child, I'm sentencing you to 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service at the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and mandatory education on type 1 diabetes management. After the hearing, we stood outside the courthouse with Kate and Sarah. How do you feel? Kate asked, hugging Daniel. Relieved, he sighed, but sad too. I never thought it would come to this with Dad. You did the right thing, Sarah reassured him. Max's safety has to come first. Speaking of Max, I said, checking my phone. He's anxious to hear how it went. As we walked to the car, we spotted Gerald and his attorney exiting the courthouse. Daniel, Gerald called out, approaching us. Can we talk, privately? Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead, Felicity. I'll catch up. I walked a short distance away with Kate and Sarah, but kept them in view. After a few minutes, Daniel rejoined us, his expression unreadable. What did he say? I asked. He wanted to apologize, Daniel replied. Said he's finally realized how serious Max's condition is. Asked if we could work toward reconciliation. And, I prompted. I told him that trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired, Daniel said. That maybe someday we could reconsider. But right now, Max's well-being comes first. How did he take it? Kate asked. Not well, Daniel admitted. He said I was choosing you over my own father. What did you say to that? Sarah asked. I told him I was choosing my son's safety over his pride, Daniel replied. And that until he truly understands what he did wrong, nothing will change. That evening, as Max finished his dinner, he looked up at us. Is Grandpa Gerald going to jail? No, honey, I explained. But he has to stay away from us for a while, and he has to learn about diabetes so he understands why your pump is so important. Do you think he'll ever understand? Max asked. Daniel and I exchanged glances. I don't know, buddy, Daniel said honestly. Some people find it very hard to admit when they're wrong. I'm proud of you both, Max said suddenly. For standing up to Grandpa? I blinked back tears. We'll always stand up for you, Max. Always, Daniel agreed, reaching across the table to hold both our hands. Later, after Max went to bed, Daniel and I sat on the porch swing. Do you think your father will ever truly understand what he did? I asked. I doubt it, Daniel sighed. His pride won't let him admit he was completely wrong. I'm sorry it came to this, I said, leaning against his shoulder. Don't be, Daniel replied firmly. You protected our son when my father wouldn't. That's what matters. As we sat there in the quiet evening, I realized something important. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't forgiveness. It's having the courage to draw a line and say, no more. For Max's sake, we had done exactly that. What would you do if someone you loved refused to acknowledge your child's medical needs? Would you forgive them, or would you draw the line?